Hi, this is Helen Thomas and the CDFM study group. Now I'm going to get ready to start studying for CDFM Module 4. So you can help me as I go through this information. I'll help you for those that are studying for the Module 4, which is the acquisition portion. Remember, you do not need the acquisition portion to earn your certification. This is just an additional incentive test that you can take. So this is the breakdown of the exam for the Module 4. The goal, strategy, and decision support section is 11%. Systems engineering is 15%. Resource management is 10%. Life cycle sustainment, 8%. Human systems integration, 5%. Acquiring information technology and national security systems, 7%. Technology protection, 5%. Test and evaluation, 9%. Decisions, assessments, and reports, 11%. And special management activities, 19%. There are 10 competency sections in the CDFM Module 4, the acquisition. And so the percentages are important because as you're studying, you want to start with the higher section, the higher percentage. That means most of your questions are going to come from that area. So as you're studying, you know where your focus needs to primarily be on the higher percentages. So, but initially you want to go through all of the information. You go through all of it, and then as you come back for your second round of going through the information, then you focus primarily on the higher percentages. All right, so I'm going to start with section 1 today, and then subsequent videos will continue the review of CDFM Module 4. So as you can see, I'm using the 2011 version of the study guide, just in case it changes, that you'll know which one this is for. So these are notes that I took for myself that kind of pull out some of the important information. And if you've already passed your CDFM Module 1, 2, and 3, you will see some of the similar information, some of the same information that you study there is here. So it's just an overlap. This just primarily focuses on the defense acquisition system. And remember when we talk about the 3 DoD support system, that's what it's talking about here again, which is JCIDS, PPBE, and the Defense Acquisition System. And then we're going to go down. Let me see if it talks about, I don't think I wrote specifically. So let me go back up here. Remember, Joint Capabilities Integration and Development System is a system of analysis that is done to identify capability gaps. Once we know what the national security strategy is and the national defense strategy, well, we need to determine in our military capabilities, in our defense capabilities, what are our capability gaps. And you look through the .mlpf, doctrine, organization, material, training, and so forth. And if it's a material solution, then that triggers the defense acquisition system that we're going to be talking about. And if it's simply we need resourcing, then you go through the planning, programming, budgeting, and execution process. So PPB is where you go to allocate the resources. It's a DoD strategic planning, program development, and resource determination process. Again, all of this, whatever we do for resource management, must support the national security strategy. That's the same strategy we talked about in Module 1, 2, and 3. The planning phase of P, the final document, is Defense Planning Guidance, or sometimes referred to as Defense Planning and Programming Guidance. Is remember that you receive guidance before you begin a process. So the joint programming guidance is a link between planning and programming. When you jointly, you receive both of those. So it may either be called DPG or DPPG. Next is the programming phase of P. That's the fiscally constrained. Now I know what my plan is. Looking at the resources, I need to prioritize my resources in my POM, in my programming. Seeks to construct a balanced set of programs that responds to the defense planning. So based on what I plan, now I need to have the resources prioritized to meet that plan. And when we talked about PPBE Module 2, we also said that the final document in the programming phase at the DoD is the resource management decision. That's the final document. The third phase of PEB is the budgeting phase. Remember, we get budget annually. All of these phases occur concurrently, meaning they're overlapping at all the time. So the same time I'm going through the POM development process, I'm also developing the budget for the next fiscal year, my input. I want to go ahead and submit that budget. So all budget estimates are reviewed by the USD Comptroller and the Office of Management and Budget. Remember, this is at DoD level, and that's OMB, the Executive Branch Resource Management Office. So the budget process resources 2 years into the future. This is how it used to be. But the key here is the draft RMDs are done while the fall review, which is between September and December of each year, OMB and the agencies, to include DoD, conduct the fall review. And at the fall review is the point where DoD can come up with their draft RMD. Once they finalize this with OMB, then RMD are staffed for comments by the Deputy SecDef, and then the final decision is published in the final resource management decision. This is the same title for both, for programming and budgeting. And the execution phase is simply looking for feedback. We want to know how you are spending the resources that you receive. So there's a lot that goes on under the execution phase. We talk about the biannual cycles. That's also in the 2011 study guide for Module 4. Year 1 is typically when you have your new national security strategy. Everything's new. And year 2 is when we did updates. So to formalize and update the agenda. So we talk about here in the new, when you create a new national security strategy, that's a new national defense strategy, you also have the chairman of the Joint Chief of Staff creating that national military strategy and submits to the SecDef, because we get all our policy guidance from the Secretary of Defense. The SecDef develops the quadrennial defense review. That's that comprehensive strategic defense document that is published by the Department of Defense. Year 2, quadrennial defense review aligns with program management, 1 year strategic program guidance, joint programming guidance, implement the QDR. So these are just the guidance, the development, the fiscal guidance, the budget guidance for programming guidance for development of the POM and the BEST. Year 3, execution of the guidance. That's considered an off year. So that's your odd year. You can look at that as required. And year 4, ensuring the legacy on year, strategic programming guidance, joint programming guidance, refining alignment of strategy and programs. So similar. So this is an on year, off year. That's odd and even. JSIDs. I'm not going to repeat this again, but it's the same thing that I've just mentioned. Method established by the Joint Chief of Staff. So just to recap then, to add to this, remember that JSID is the responsibility of the Vice Chairman of the Joint Chief of Staff, who is the Chairman of the Joint Requirements Oversight Council. So these are the individual, this is the council that's responsible for this system, the JSID. That's what that is saying here. And also for acquisition category 1 Delta, which is your general DoD level acquisition programs and information assurance programs, major automation systems programs, the JROC makes recommendation to Defense Acquisition Board or Information Technology Acquisition Board. The JROC is chaired by the Vice Chairman of the Joint Chief of Staff, and that Vice Chairman, this guy, is also a co-chair on the Defense Acquisition Board. So remember the three systems: JCIDS, PPBE, Defense Acquisition Board. So this guy not only is the chairman responsible for JCIDS, he also co-chairs the Defense Acquisition Board. So he sits on that other board, which is in charge of this system, Defense Acquisition System. And the other chairman for the Defense Acquisition System is the Undersecretary of Defense Acquisition, Technology, and Logistics, USD AT&L, and you see it down here. So your major defense acquisition program, major automated information systems for the most expensive programs, reviewed by the Office of the Secretary of Defense level, major defense MDAPs are denoted as Acquisition Category 1 Delta, if they're that level. And if it's a major automated information system, they are considered 1 AM and are subject to review by the Assistant Secretary of Defense for Networks and Information Integration. So your technology folks here. Your regulation that I skipped up here for Defense Acquisition System, your DoD 5000.01. Whenever you see DoD, that's your DoD level guidance. So DoD 5000.01 just mainly talks about the Defense Acquisition System. And then your DoD 5000.02 talks about the actual operational steps and principles and categories of that acquisition program. So DoD 5000.01 and 0.02. So Milestone Decision Authority of ACAT 1 Delta is the USD AT&L. He's the senior individual who's in charge of acquisition at the DoD level. And that's for general major defense acquisition programs. And then your automated programs, your Assistant Secretary of Defense and or your CIO is the chairman of Information and Technology Acquisition Board. So they have a board. So you have a chairman, then you have a board. Milestone Decision Authority simply means that these are the guys that would say, proceed with the research, proceed with the process, proceed with the development. Because the acquisition approach begins with the acquisition strategy. Everything you got to first develop a strategy before you start spending money. So it defines the approach that is taken with the program to achieve full capability, either evolutionary or in one step. So do we already have something existing in our inventory that we can add to in a single step, or is it an evolutionary project or resource that we need to develop? The DoD prefers evolutionary acquisition. That means increments have specific sets of parameters and thresholds and dollar amount. So if you do it in increments, then we can determine at any point if it's not doing what we expect, because again, we're trying to fill that capability gap. And if you can't fill that capability gap with your development, at some point, you need to be able to cancel that project. So evolutionary acquisition is the preferred method. So it delivers capabilities in increments up front, the need for future capability. We can't wait until we need a new weapon system to start developing it. So these things have to evolve as time goes. So the program manager must consider the value of that military equipment. We got to have a price on it so we can determine the market value. So this is a DoD initiative to value and depreciate that equipment. So from cradle to grave, from the time I create it to the time that it's destroyed, what is it going to cost me to sustain it, to destroy it? The PM that has deliverable end item with a unit cost at or above $100,000 should prepare a program description as part of the acquisition strategy at milestone C. So I think I'm going to have to develop that milestone chart to further understand this process, because in the acquisition system, you have milestone A, B, and C. You have pre-systems acquisition, systems acquisition, sustainment. So in order to visualize these steps, because you're going to have to know, from what I understand, I haven't taken the test yet, and so I'm actually just studying. So this is my best way of getting into this part of the material, is you have to know which milestone these items occur. And I think this is called the card. So the card is done at milestone C. And technology development conducted in milestone A. And the purpose of technology development is to reduce technology risk. So you have a technology development strategy which guides the effort in this phase. Then acquisition strategy guides the remaining phase. So first we develop the technology, and we have a technology development strategy to figure out how, again, that risk factor, reduce the risk, and then we can figure out the rest of the acquisition phase. So we need an acquisition strategy that guides the remaining part of the acquisition and the technology development, presented and approved at milestone B. Because milestone B, once we get here, that's when we actually formally enter into the acquisition process. So when you have an approval in milestone B, that is what triggers the entry into engineering and manufacturing development. That means we're going ahead, full force ahead. The acquisition program baseline is developed by the program manager. So program manager is the subject matter expert on that particular equipment, for lack of a better word. And so the user is required to document what is this equipment supposed to be able to do. So this is done through the acquisition program baseline. It consists of an objective value and a threshold. You also want to know, well, how much, based on your expertise, how much is it going to cost? Values represent what the user desires and expects. The acquisition program baseline is derived from the user's performance requirement. You think of a performance work statement. That's where we write up what it is that needs to get done for that particular capability to be successful. Schedule requirements and best estimates of total program costs, consistent with projected funding. So thresholds are acceptable limits that still meet the capability. So whatever threshold that is given, it means that's the level that's still going to meet the capability. And per 10 U.S. Code, so this is the law, in Title 10 U.S. Code 2435, the DoD may not obligate funds for major defense acquisition programs after entry into system development and demonstration without that senior individual acquisition person approving the baseline. Without an MDA, Milestone Decision Authority approved baseline, unless the USD AT&L specifically approves it. Again, it's saying that we cannot continue. So before any phase, any process begins, there must be a decision review. So that's what this is saying, is we cannot go into start developing a system and we didn't have prior approval from the Milestone Decision Authority. So this, I think, would help as we go through this process. You see the joint staff reviews, the capabilities development document. So these are some of the things we talked about. So what's a trade-off? Maximize program management and contractor flexibility to make cost performance trade-offs. So again, we're trying to cut costs as we are going into this acquisition. So what are some things we can give up? And the trading space or trade space is the difference between objectives, what I want to do, and my level, my threshold. How much can I afford to spend? So what can I get for the amount of money that I have? A term that you hear in this acquisition is cost as an independent variable. And basically what that means is we try to figure out everything that needs to be done, all the capabilities, the objectives, these standards. We put a cost on it, and then you compare item A from item B, process 1 from process 2. So the best time to reduce costs in a program is early on in the acquisition process. It doesn't make sense to wait till you finish developing this new weapon system to determine it doesn't do what I expect it to do. So if you have all these internal reviews and decision points that you go and you reevaluate the process, then that milestone decision authority will identify and know when things need to be adjusted. So the 3 acquisition documents that you need to be familiar with is technology development strategy, acquisition strategy, and the acquisition program baseline. Ensures personnel are considering all aspects of acquisition, balance between cost, schedule, and performance risk. So the POM and BEST unresolved issues are forwarded to the SecDef and are published in the Resource Management Decision. So these are the same document when we talked about the PPBE process, the RMD. So the best time to reduce total ownership costs and program schedule is early in the acquisition. And this goes back to this concept of the CAIV. So this concludes section 1 of the CDFM Module 4 study guide. And I will see you guys again next time as we continue review of CDFM Module 4, the 2011 study guide.